Hello, and yet again, we're back on your screens. Welcome to BM8 Unfiltered. I am your host, Bucci. This particular platform was created so that you can have an interaction with Honorable Brian Mundubile, who is the Tonse Alliance president and 2026 candidate for the presidential elections come August. A lot has been said throughout the week. It's time to put some of those issues to bed as President Brian Mundubile responds to all the hard-hitting questions that you have. Let's get straight into it. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, Bucci. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How's been your week so far?
Very good, very good. To the people out there, my people in Solwezi, I'm saying to GVAP. I'm speaking to my brothers and sisters in Luampa. I'm saying Luchwani. People in Mugubudu, Tilibwanji, Mwena Mporokosa, Mwena Kasama, Tulishani. So I'm doing good. I'm doing good, Bucci.
Another very busy week for you. How's been the week in terms of how you're faring yourself?
We're extremely busy. We are very busy, Bucci. As you may have noted, there's a number of people that are coming to Tonse. Just yesterday, we received my younger brother, Honorable Munia Zulu, and in the week we had a number of opposition members coming to Tonse. They are heading to the core from the Zambian people that we must come together and form a formidable force to stand against the UPND in the August elections.
What does this say about opposition unity? Does this show that the opposition is united in a core by the people or for the people?
Yes, of course, it's an ongoing process. It's work in progress. But so far at Tonse, I feel that we have done quite a lot of work. We are standing at 15 registered political parties and 17 civil society organizations. So clearly the voice under Tonse is growing bigger and louder by the day.
Let's start with the elephant in the room. The delimitation report is out, and this is something that everyone wanted to know how it was going to go. Finally made public by the ECZ chairperson, Madame Zelomes. What are your initial thoughts regarding this development?
Well, we are not surprised with what came out. It just confirms our earlier suspicions. We knew that the rushed process, the process through which this delimitation was being undertaken was a compromised one for one reason. The UPND fearing that they had lost popularity, they needed to do certain alignments. They needed to make certain adjustments to try and give themselves an advantage. Which the brief background to this process is that there was a 2019 report. The 2019 report created 92 new constituencies. And in that report, there were a number of recommendations. One of them was that the minimum number of constituencies per province should stand at 7. Of course, a number of provinces would have more, but the barest minimum, according to the area committee that looked at delimitation, put it at 7. So when the UPND proposed in the Constitution Amendment Bill number 7 to add 55 new constituencies, we wondered. We wanted to find out what the basis of that 55 was when the recommendation was at 7 in the earlier report. Of course, the technical committee that was put in place by President Hakainde Hichilema came up and actually recommended 70. Now, the rationale behind 70 was that each province should have 7. Now, when you look at what has happened today, the announcements that have been made, you will agree with me that constituencies, mainly in the UPN strongholds, have more than 7. The strongholds of the opposition, mainly in the north, others are 5, like Luapula, northern are 6, and many others still remain at 6. So the initial reaction is that it just confirmed what our earlier suspicions were, that UPND wanted to give itself an advantage through this delimitation process. Even when you come to Lusaka, you see that they've given constituencies in areas where they're seemingly strong. So that would be our.
But maybe the argument would be, well, we are responding to the needs in particular constituencies, because certain particular constituencies might have, depending on the mass, the land, the size of particular constituencies in certain provinces, and also the number of people in terms of answering the call to development might actually need more. What do you say to that?
Well, if that was the case, Buchi, they would have taken prudent steps. Remember, the initial report contained 92. So let's say that now we will still have more than 100 if we include those MPs that will come via proportional representation. If indeed that was the reason, what the UPND could have done was, say, to take the number 100 constituencies, and then taking into account the needs of gender, or maybe the women, they could have simply said, we use a quota system and include 50 out of 100 blocked and reserved for women. Regardless of where these constituencies will be, you could simply say only women who compete in these constituencies. You take maybe another 20 and say these are reserved for youths. You take another 15, these are reserved for people living with disabilities. You would have resolved that problem. I hope you get me, Buchi.
Yeah.
It was much easier because the 92 was based on research. People went around and discovered that 92 constituencies needed to be delimitated. So when the number was reduced to 55, of course we questioned. I'm happy that the technical committee improved the number to 70. So at 70, our minimum expectation was that each province would have received 7 constituencies. This is not the case now.
So what do you see? How do you see this, first of all, affecting the upcoming elections? And at the same time, when we sit for Parliament, come 2028, we're seated in Parliament, 2027, what does this inform? What will be different in Parliament with the way the delimitation has been done?
Well, of course, the attempt by the UPND is to give themselves an advantage. But what I want to tell you, Buchi, today, and tell the Zambian people, is that the UPND will lose this year's election, regardless. The people of Zambia are decided. Even in constituencies where, they are strong, there are people there that are suffering. The farmers in Southern Province, I was speaking to farmers in Southern Province yesterday. There are a number of farmers who have really complained about how they've been treated under the UPND. They actually confessed to say, initially, because of the UPND propaganda, we thought President Edgar Chagwa and his PF were actually disadvantaging farmers in this part of the country. But the farmers have actually realized to say, under the UPND, they've suffered more. It's the same complaints that we have in Northwestern Province, which was previously a stronghold for the UPND. When you look at the plight of the small-scale miners in that province, when you look at the plight of farmers in that province, you look at the plight of traditional leaders in that province. So clearly, they no longer have a stronghold. So the people of Zambia will still speak out on 13th of August. And like I said earlier, the UPND are out of power come this year, August.
Well, as we conclude on the delimitation report, what does it say about representation of people with regards to laws being passed in Parliament with the delimitation done like this? What does it say? What do you think it says to that?
Well, in terms of representation, when you look at the normal functioning of Parliament, you really should expect an impact. But you see, what we've been through now, you have a situation where the MPs really have nothing to say to represent their people, because there's a split loyalty there. And the question that begs is, to whom should the citizen or the voter align their allegiance? Is it to a political party, the MP? Should he align his allegiance to the political party or to the people? You see that there are a number of motions that are brought in Parliament, sometimes by the opposition, that should work for the people. And they are shot down because the chief whip of that particular political party has asked the MPs to shoot it down because the president is not comfortable. So a number of laws that are passed are not in consonance with the aspirations of the people, as it were. So the voter now has got to wake up and realize that they are sponsoring members of parliament who do not advance the interests of the people that voted for them, but interests of political parties. The warning that we should give to political parties, including Tonse, is that we must allow our members of parliament to interact widely with the voters, get instructions from the voters as they're debating on the floor of the House. They should be able to speak for and on behalf of the people.
Well, let's continue. Still on the ECZ, concerns keep coming around the independence and impartiality of some of the ECZ officials. President Hakainde Hichilema recently appointed a well-known cadre of the UPND to serve as commissioner in the ECZ. What do you make of this?
Buchi, all the commissioners of the ECZ today are members of the UPND. So when you ask me about the independence of the ECZ, really, the answer is that it's a UPND commission. It cannot be fair. You don't expect it to be independent at any given time. So the arrogance in the UPND to even appoint another UPND member at this last hour only shows you the extent that they want to go to try and win this year's election.
So you don't expect a free and fair election?
There can be no free and fair elections for as long as the current composition of the ECZ remains the same.
So you've reiterated on several occasions that ECZ should not be independent, but should be seen
to be independent.
Yes. Independent. How would you suggest President Hichilema does this, or how would you suggest ECZ does this in showing it is very independent and away from the current administration?
Well, the people superintending over the affairs of the ECZ are UPND. They can't pretend. So even if they tried, it would be very difficult to see them as being independent, because all the people they see red when they see them. It's the red regalia.
So I'm concerned here because we're going into an election and we're getting closer and closer to the elections. You've been seeing these things happening, and there are accusations that the broader opposition isn't doing much to hold those in power accountable for some of the excess power that is being shown. How would you respond to that? Because now you're saying, well, there's this happening at the ECZ. What should be the role of the opposition to ensure that you hold ECZ accountable? And are you doing enough?
Well, that statement is very accurate, which if you ask me. As the opposition, we have spent a lot of time fighting amongst ourselves, reconciling amongst ourselves. We've left a number of things unchecked, as it were. That is why today, Buchi, you have cases at the Anti-Corruption Commission involving ministers, and the DG is communicating with the Minister of Home Affairs, trying to get permission to prosecute these ministers. It's very, very unfortunate. We've said this for the past 2 years. There's not only 2 ministers, there's up to 10 ministers who reported to SEC, and their cases are very advanced. But the Anti-Corruption Commission is unable to move. And some of the reasons why there's been no traction on those particular cases is the information we're getting out of the communication between the DG for SEC and the Minister of Home Affairs, where she's now seeking for permission to proceed and prosecute. SEC is very quick, to prosecute members of the opposition, even on frivolous charges, as it were. We haven't seen that speed coming from the SEC when it comes to prosecuting members of the UPND. Puchi, you must know that when you look at the FIC reports, for instance, the past 5 years, there's close to $10 billion reported in illicit financial flows. Now, these FIC reports, when they're published to you and me, they don't give specific names of the people that are involved. But the report that goes to the president has got the actual details. How possible is it that with $10 billion worth of illicit financial flows, there's been no one whatsoever named or indeed summoned to go and answer for these illicit financial flows. You look at the recruitment of police officers, for instance. So I am answering your question. We haven't done much as the opposition. There are a number of things that we would have put to check, which we haven't, because of our own internal issues, internal quarrels and reconciliations, as it were. We've left the Zambian people on the wayside, being exploited, like our youths have been exploited by being left out in this police recruitment, as it were.
You mentioned the police recruitment. Let's dive straight into it. It's because it's made public discourse. Recruitment of police officers has continued. A cross-section of citizens have condemned the exercise. President Hichilema has now promised to look at the matter, and he says that he has heard their cries and he's going to do something about this. And what do you expect him to do? What are you, because he made these statements recently when he was, coming in as the main contender for the August elections. He went through unopposed during that particular party General Assembly. So at the party General Assembly, he makes the promise that he's going to look into the recruitment of many of these police officers.
Well, his response was very poor and vague, to say the least. A president is expected to be decisive. Buchi, how long does it take to cancel a process? What is required is for President Hakainde Hichilema to cancel that particular process. How long does it take to cancel a process? The president would have just made a pronouncement right then, cancelling that process going forward. And then other matters can be attended to. For him to say he's looking into it, that was very poor. It was a very poor response.
So, what did you make of the process? Let's talk about the process and how we found out about the recruitment that was going on. How did you find out, and what did you make of the process?
Well, first of all, it's very clear that these police officers are being recruited in readiness for the elections. You should then wonder, if they're being recruited in readiness for the elections, why was the recruitment secretive? Why was government very careful in picking names of who should be recruited? Why did government start with the UPND as a party to send memos right across the country in the party structures to recruit their cadres? The answer is simple. The UPND government does not mean well in this particular recruitment. You and I should now wonder what instructions, what specific training these people are undergoing. What are they telling them? In the recent past, Buchi, if you've noticed, whenever we have had a situation around the police stations, the SCC, and the courts, when the police come in to try and marshal the crowds that come around there, you immediately see two groups. There are those professional police that you can clearly see are conducting themselves professionally. There is another group that normally comes in masks. These are cadres who just come in to harass people, beat people. They come in very violently. There is no ethic applied in their duty at all. So any given time when you see police operation, pay attention. There is a group of cadres in police uniform, and they don't want to identify themselves. They actually put on masks. For what reason? Only God knows. Then there's another set of frustrated police officers who are actually very professional. They conduct their activities, whether they are marshalling a violent crowd, they'll go in very professionally to do their work because they've been trained and they subscribe to some code of ethics. The other ones do not subscribe to any ethic at all. So these 4,000, my suspicion is that this is the team that is going to be trained and deployed right across the country to begin to harass voters around the polling stations. That's my suspicion.
Let's talk to the availability of jobs, because this was an opportunity for a young man or a young Zambian who was thinking, oh, there's an opportunity where one day I'm going to become a police officer and serve my beloved country. Seeing how this process was conducted, How does it make you feel, considering you're aspiring to become president, and you were also promising for recruitments such as this one?
It makes me feel very sad. Remember that as Tonse, we pursue pro-poor policies. We pursue policies that revolve around Nakulumutinta Pamakasa. Now, abeshikulu wakwa Nakulumutinta, azukulu anakulumutinta. Nakulumutinta apunzisa azukulu, asiliza, apitana ku college, afuna mkala kapokola, afuna mkala police. They can't get a job under the UPND because they do not have anybody. Nakulumutinta has no connections in the UPND government. Those names, the grandchildren of Nakulumutinta, cannot appear on the lists that will come from Batuke Menda from the party structures. This indeed is unfortunate. Like we said before, Buchi, as Tonse, we will reform the civil service. We will reform the police service. We'll provide an environment where job opportunities will be available to all. An environment where job opportunities in the police service will not be a preserve of the privileged few. So we'll look at a merit-based recruitment process.
What does a merit-based recruitment process look like?
All those who qualify to be employed should be given an opportunity, regardless of what their names are, regardless of their political affiliation. First of all, we need to build an independent and a professional civil service, not a police service that is inclined to political parties. Most of the mistreatments, the abductions that are going on right now, and the violent approach that the police has displayed in the recent past is on account of the fact that the police officers who are employed are actually cadres. So they would not deal with any matter professionally because they're coming in with a party lens, as it were. So under Tonse, job opportunities will be equitable. So it's a merit-based recruitment process. We will ensure that professionalism reigns right across the process, and these particular processes will be above board. They will be advertised at any given point, and we ensure that the recruitment is balanced across the provinces, as it were.
Let's talk about the main opposition. Your main contender, rather, for the general elections, President Hakainde Hichilema, went unopposed at the party's General Assembly, and the entire process was conducted in 1 week. What do you make of the manner of holding General Assembly and Mr. Hakainde Hichilema's candidature?
Well, the internal process of holding the inter-party elections in the UPND has been a sham. It's been very shameful that a government in power, would conduct its internal affairs like that. Which is not very long ago. You could just take a walk into the past and maybe saw how the Patriotic Front was in power, would conduct its intra-party elections. So you are talking about a process, first of all, which was earlier injected or earlier petitioned by some of the members that the mandate of the Central Committee or the Management Committee had expired earlier. And of course, there was back and forth in the media. But we saw that when these members took the matters to court, the UPND quickly swung into action and began to hold elections. You are privy to exactly what has transpired right across the country and the kind of elections that have been held. So it's indeed a sham. So maybe, Buchi, we were expecting too much from the UPND to expect them to hold a credible election this year. Maybe we're expecting too much. I think what we saw from the intra-party elections gave us a cue. It gave us an idea of what their organizational capabilities may be insofar as the elections are concerned. So what you have this accelerated process, a non-transparent process.
But do you think he had an opposition within the party of other members that could have stood against him during that period?
President Hakainde Hichilema has been president of this party, I think, for 20 years. So tell me, when was he ever challenged in the last 20 years? When we say the UPND as a party, there is no internal democracy. That's exactly what we mean. Who has ever challenged him in the past 20 years? Nobody. Okay? The misfortune is that they would want to transplant that culture into a national election. Right now, the UPND government is busy, trying to annihilate any competitor to President Hakainde Hichilema. They're trying to frustrate the nomination of any strong candidate against President Hakainde Hichilema because that's their culture. That's what they're used to. They don't believe in elections. They believe that President Hakainde Hichilema should be the only one on the ballot. The Zambians are saying no. And the Zambians are going to resist any attempt to try and stop any candidate. The Zambians are saying they have a right to choose who their leader should be. President Hakainde Hichilema was given an opportunity to lead Zambia for 5 years. He had an opportunity to prove himself. If indeed he had proved himself, whether it's in the area of free education, school feeding programs, CDF, and performed up to 95% as he has claimed, he should have nothing to worry about.
Well, during that assembly, President Hichilema said that there was a lot of challenges caused by the previous administration that will not only it will take a long time, more than 5 years, for him to overturn some of these things in order to bring development to the country, so to speak.
Buchi, you can't come into government and export all the maize that you find and later say, no, the challenge was caused by the PF. What challenge did the PF cause? By growing more maize? Storing more maize in those shades, and you call that a challenge? How is that a challenge? You found maize in the shades, okay? The previous government improved power generation from 1,600 megawatts to 3,400. When you come in, you begin to export power, and you say they caused the challenge by improving power generation, by doubling power generation. So, Buchi, you must take what the president says with a pinch of salt, because he goes out there to try and mislead the Zambian people. But what the Zambian people are saying, say what you have to, draw as many graphs as you want, put up as many equations as you want, but for as long as Milimi is now costing over 300 kwacha, we will not vote for you. They're saying to the president, say what you want, okay? Draw as many graphs as you want, but if fuel is still costing over 20 kwacha, we will not vote for you. So the Zambians are tired. Look, Zambians are simply saying, you were preaching equal opportunities. President Hakainde Hichilema, at any given time, he was talking about equal opportunities. What opportunities can you talk about now? I'll tell you that the National Council for Construction released some information that 88% of the contracts that have been performed in the recent past were done by foreign companies. There was only 12% available for locals. So what equal opportunities are we talking about? The recruitment of the police, as it were. What equal opportunities are we talking about? Go to the civil service. Go to the civil service and find out whether President Hakainde Hichilema has been in compliance with Article 259 that talks about regional diversity in employment.
Well, he will say that we've improved the country. We've got CDF that is working for the common Zambian. He will say he's got free education, which is currently working. He will say there's debt service. The debt, we're working on the debt that was left by the Patriotic Front. What do you have to say to that?
Go and find out what the auditor's report is saying now about CDF. Go and look at the problems that this has caused. Why? Because the cadreism under the UPND is actually in offices. Cadres are going in to get loans from CDF, to get projects under CDF and just not perform. You saw how long it took for those 156 ambulances to be delivered. Up to now, some of them have not been delivered. Okay? Toyota Zambia is just around the corner. If you gave a contract to Toyota Zambia to supply 200 ambulances, they will give you delivery dates and they will indeed supply. Now, cadres, UPND cadres, are the ones who got a contract to supply Toyota Land Cruisers as ambulances when Toyota Zambia, the dealer, was just around the corner. And 2 years later, not all the ambulances have been supplied. And what has happened to the people behind this? Nothing. So we have to be very serious as a country. I mean, the Zambians will not feed on rhetoric of CDF, free education and all that. We've got to implement practical measures on the ground that will improve the lives of the Zambian people.
Look, it's another election period. and that means that the China Mulungushi textile in Kabwe rose back to life, and it was getting commissioned by President Hakainde Hichilema earlier today. For Tonse, what is the plan for former mining towns such as Kabwe, as far as industrialization is concerned, and as well as the textile industry? What does Tonse put in place to say, when we come into office, we are going to change the way Zambia is looking right now, and when we do commission something, it will not be for an election, but more to the development of Zambia, and it stands the test of time?
Yes, I'm happy, Bucci. Your suspicions are as good as mine. So the announcement to reopen Mulungushi came 2 years ago. In fact, they said we are reopening Mulungushi. That was over 2 to 3 years ago. We've been monitoring. It's only being reopened today, and strategically, in good time to be able to print the UPND Chitenge materials. That we know. I'm sure you're aware that they are doing a lot of Chitenge material from the Mulungushi textiles. Now, in Tonse, we plan to the end. A facility like Mulungushi is a very good facility for our people in Kabwe. So we don't look at it in isolation. We are looking at the support systems, meaning the cotton farmers that will be able to supply the raw material into Kabwe. What will be most unfortunate is to allow the raw materials to be coming from outside Zambia. And just the value addition is what happens at Mulungushi. The jobs that can be created out of that value chain are so many. So as Tonse, we'll ensure that we promote cotton growing in Kabwe so that the raw material actually comes from Kabwe. There will be employment created from logistics, from transporters, as it were. So that way, the people of Kabwe will be able to benefit from the employment creation, as it were. So it will not be a cosmetic opening of Mulungushi. We will plan for it to the end. This one is just cosmetic because they're in a hurry to print Chitenge materials for themselves. So to complete the value chain, the farmers are supported with backbone infrastructure. They're also supported with whatever other help they would need. And these farmers will grow, and the market terminates at Mulungushi in Kabwe. So in that particular case, under the Tonse model, the Mulungushi textiles is looked at as an aggregator. So in every sector, whether you're talking about chicken rearing, tomato growing, cotton growing, there will always be an aggregator. So those are the sort of value chains that will be created. And the regional development authorities will look out to make sure that backbone infrastructure and all other facilities that government is able to give are given in those particular areas to boost industrialization. It's our belief that it's only through industrialization that we can create employment. And if we create employment through industrialization, we can then fight poverty.
Let's talk about the problem that has been consistent throughout time from politicians and many people who are technocrats that have spoken about Zambia. There's been this saying that, look, we need finance from outside. If it's not finance, we need personnel from outside. If it's not personnel, we need machinery from outside to ensure that any sector actually works, produces what it needs, and eventually gives the benefit back to government and the people at large. How is Tonse Alliance going to ensure, or how is Tonse Alliance planning to work with the Zambians to make sure that the Zambian is at the heart of every development agenda, but at the same time that these things are functional?
Yes, under Tonse, we will come up with policies that will improve and increase the receipts from the mining sector, for instance. This is the major sector. We will make sure that we have a win-win situation for the investor and for the Zambian. We will create what we are calling a sovereign wealth fund. So some of the money that is coming from the sectors like the mining sector is deposited in this sovereign wealth fund. This is the money that will be used for several empowerment programs with an end in mind, targeted empowerment programs. For instance, you are talking about Mulungushi textiles. The farmers in Central Province and growing cotton will need government assistance in infrastructure, for instance. They will need assistance in equipment. So this sovereign wealth fund will be specific for industrialization, to help boost industrialization. This country has money, Buchi. If this country had no money, how are people managing to transfer up to $10 billion in illicit financial flows? So one other area we're going to look at the areas of corruption and ensure that we reform the Anti-Corruption Commission so that they're able to deal with the matters swiftly. We begin to plug some of these leakages, some of these illicit flows, and ensure that we return most of this money into a sovereign wealth fund. We have a number of challenges. The corruption that SEC is focusing on, they're focused on this corruption coming from procurement officers, getting a bribe for giving out a tender, giving out an order, and so on and so forth. But they're keeping your eyes away from the real corruption. The real corruption that is shifting this country into poverty is the money like $10 billion illicitly leaving this country. That's the kind of corruption that we're going to deal with. The corruption we should deal with is the corruption coming from government, where a minister can forgive a mining company from paying $1 billion in taxes and only ask them to pay $23 million. That is the corruption that we're going to have to deal with. We'll deal with the corruption where a mining house repatriates up to $2.5 billion illegally. They are later arrested and detained in police and released on bond, and the case is in court. A minister just comes up and withdraws that case and forgets about the 2.5. So your eyes on corruption have to refocus. It must refocus on the decisions government officials make and run it through a test whether those particular decisions favor or disadvantage the public, whether they favor private interest over and above public interest. So you strictly look at government policy. You strictly look at administration, indeed legislation. You must be able to discover the corruption in these decisions that are made so that your eyes are not focused on this petty corruption, which if put together, even the impact on the country would be dismal. I'll repeat that corruption is corruption, however small. But we must ensure that once we plug this corruption, it indeed has a positive impact on the country. Some of these amounts that SEC is running with, yes, the wrongdoers must be prosecuted. But these are amounts that would have minimal impact on the economy, even if, say, the money was to be paid back. How do you allow $10 billion to go and there's no case at all? But you see, you're chasing after $200,000, or this other guy got $1 million kwacha. All these amounts put together may not even amount to $50 million. But $10 billion has left the country and nobody says anything about it. A minister has made a decision unilaterally to forgive a mining house from paying $1 billion to ZRA and tell them to pay 23. What motivates his decision is not even questioned by anybody. So these are some of the reforms that we're going to bring about in the fight against corruption. It's to seriously interrogate the decisions that are made by government officials to ensure that there is no corruption in those particular decisions. It's one thing, somebody occupies an office. He makes a decision, government loses 1 billion kwacha because maybe at individual level they're benefiting.
Honorable, still on the issue of finance, let's talk to the finance minister, Minister Stumbeko Msokotwane, who is currently in Washington, D.C., where he's attending an IMF World Bank spring meeting, and has revealed that government will lose 200 million over the next 3 months as a result of cuts to fuel levies due to the war in Iran. How do you think government could have navigated this issue?
You see, the decisions that government makes should be durable. Government should be able to interrogate these decisions and ensure that they look at all the impacts that can arise as a result of these decisions. In policies, you have what is called what do you call that? A regulatory impact assessment. When you're about to come up with a new policy, you put it through a test, through a RIA, okay? You say, okay, if we closed Indeni today and we change the use of the pipeline, what would be the impact? The question to ask would be, all right, Indeni is closed, the pipeline is been converted into transporting finished products. What if there's a war in Iran? The instability in the Middle East is not unusual. We've been going through this from time immemorial. So meaning that the foreseeability of that possibility should have been brought to the fore when they're looking at the rear. They would have then looked at a situation where there is instability in these oil-producing countries. Had they done that, they would not have closed Indeni. Instead, they would have looked at what it would cost to improve Indeni by investing in a hydrocracker, so that Indeni now is a fully fledged refinery that will be able to process different types of crude oil. Now, because we have colleagues in government today who are just businessmen, they only look out for profit. They come into government and they begin to look at what they can have, what they can get from government. So the decisions around Indeni were selfish decisions. They were promoting individual interests. Colleagues in government were looking at privatizing. They were looking at aggrandizing. They were looking at getting Indeni so that it's now privately owned and owned by themselves. Now, the only strategy they had was to frustrate the operations at Indeni. I belong to a committee of parliament on parastatal bodies. We've been to Indeni. We've interrogated the officials at Indeni. If you speak to management, clearly management is very frustrated. They had advised government against closing Indeni. They had advised government against converting the use of the pipeline. So what Musokotwane is talking about, wherever he is, Comrade Musokotwane, he's just a test of his own medicine. They caused that problem. That $200 million would have gone a long way towards improving infrastructure. Maybe it would have contributed to the construction of the Kawamba-Mporokoso Road, or indeed the Mporokoso-Nsama-Kaputa Road, where the Vice President comes from. That road now is like a river. Had they not wasted this money because of the bad decisions on Indeni, maybe that money could have worked on improving the Mpika-Kasama Road. So it's unfortunate. We have colleagues in government who make decisions in favor of private capital. So the decision on Indeni was a very, very big mistake, and it's going to cost this country dearly. So as Tonse, when we get into power, we'll quickly invest in Indeni, ensure that we buy a hydrocracker and restore the refinery and improve the operations. We will further invest in the storage capabilities right across the country. The previous government invested in a number of storage facilities. So you had facilities in Mongu, Mpika, and everywhere else. We should be able to improve our storage facilities to hold stock, for even that could last the country in up to 6 months, such that even if there's instability in some region, the country can still survive on its buffer stock that would last a minimum of half a year.
We're almost approaching nomination week, and can you assure the nation that your name is going to be on the ballot?
Ebuchi, I want to assure the nation that the name Brian Muntayalwa Mundubile will be on the ballot. I have looked at the Constitution, Article 100. I've looked at the eligibility criteria. I meet all the qualifications to be on the ballot. I also know that Article 1 of the Constitution talks about the sanctity of the Constitution. The Constitution is sacrosanct, that even if the UPND today decide to introduce new laws in subordinate legislation that would introduce new qualifications for a presidential candidate, it would not supersede what is provided for in the Constitution. So what is in the Constitution under Article 100 is superior. And this is what we are going to use to file my nomination. So I am on the ballot paper. All the Zambians, please be at peace. Your candidate, the BM8 Tonse Alliance candidate, Brian Mundubile, will be on the ballot because he qualifies under the Constitution. The other subordinate legislation that they will bring will not stop the filing of my candidature, because the Constitution, allows me to stand as presidential candidate. So there are colleagues who are going around. I got a call from Mongu. People were saying, one of our fellow MPs, some young MP whose name I wouldn't want to mention, I don't want to embarrass him any further, than he embarrassed himself in Mongu to say, no, Mundubile, he will not stand. Kaidi, his name is not registered in this political party and that. I don't know where he was getting that from. So I got calls from Mongo. We have a lot of support, by the way, from Western Province. And I really appreciate the support that we're getting from Western Province. So they called in. It was a radio program and they were calling in for assurance. I said, no, come on, I qualify. I know that the UPND is up in arms. They know that a BM8, a Brian Muntaila Mundubile on the ballot this year in August, they stand no chance. They will try what they can, but I qualify and I'm going to be on the ballot.
You've mentioned that this Saturday is a very monumental day for the Tonse Alliance, as you will be launching finally the manifesto, which is going to inform policy when you make office. Please go through some of the main pillars of this manifesto and what is the backbone and that forms the framework of this manifesto that will be launched on Saturday.
Well, the backbone is unity and restoration. We are going to reset the country. If you look at governance institutions, you have governance institutions that have collapsed completely. As Tonse, we are going to restore these institutions. We are going to restore the rule of law. We are going to restore unity in the country. So these are some of the pillars that we are going to look at. We've made an undertaking to make the civil service professional, and all recruitments in the civil service will be merit-based, as it were. We have talked about job and wealth creation through industrialization and setting up of agro-industrial processing zones right across the country. We've talked about reforms in the mining sector, where we'll start with the small-scale miners. We will formalize that particular sector so that our young men and women operating that particular sector can begin to benefit, from the mineral resources that are coming from there. As regards the large-scale mining, we will get into a win-win situation where they get a fair share of return on their investment, and then Nakuru Mutinta also benefits from the mineral wealth that this country has. So it will be very exciting. You'll be very happy. We are looking at the digital economy, for instance. We are looking at monetizing, content, social media content that most of our youths have been complaining about. As government will take practical steps to ensure that those that generate content on social media get some monetary compensation for it, as it were. So we'll deal with the digital economy as an economic sector. It will not be a by the way. We'll look at it, and we would actually have a ministry specifically looking at the digital economy, as it were. We will look at creative arts. Creative arts will be elevated to an economic sector. If you look at creative arts today, I think they're under Ministry of Youth and Sport, and it's subordinated to a department. The budgetary allocation per year, I think, is 27 million kwacha. So you can see what this government, how it looks at creative arts. We are elevating it. We are elevating it to an economic level. We will look at the film industry, for instance. I know that we have a number of young men and women that are talented and skilled in the film industry. So we'll come up with legislation that will support these particular sectors, as it were. We will look at musicians and see how best their rights will be protected. The intellectual property and copyrights will be protected to ensure that they get a fair share for their talent and indeed their skills.
Well, you're watching BM8 Unfiltered. My name is Buchi. I am your host. I'm here with Honorable Brian Mundubile, who is president of the Tonse Alliance and candidate for the 2026 August election. Well, Honorable, I have to call it a wrap, but there's so much that we would have loved to go through, to discuss, to break down the manifesto and see so many areas where we could interrogate it. I know there's a lot of questions that have come through in our comment section, but due to time, we'll have to move those questions to TikTok. So if you've got those questions that you've put in the comment section, Honorable Brian Mundubile is answering those on his TikTok account. Go over to TikTok, that's Brand Mundubile, and just there, he will answer all the questions you've left in the comment section. I've been your host on this program. My name is Buchi. Until next week, Thursday, for BM8 Unfiltered, this is where we wrap it.